This is our website. It's tesseractpoint.com, and in case you're not familiar with the word tesseract, it's actually a word from geometry. It's one that I think sort of embodies the idea of going beyond the normal. It represents a cube in 4 dimensions. If you think about sort of a logical progression from, say, a straight line, take a straight line, you drag it, kind of draws out the boundaries of a square. Take a square and you drag it, and now you've got a cube. If you take a cube and you move it in the 4th dimension, the shape you get is a tesseract. And the generic word for all these shapes together is hypercube. So a tesseract is a hypercube in 4 dimensions. And if you know any Greek, tessera, take off the CT, that's just the Greek number for 4. Or the Greek word for the number 4. And I didn't know this, but the word tesseract is sort of, it's made some appearances in some movies recently, like in the Avengers series, the power cube that they use. Sometimes the good guys have it, sometimes the bad guys. But the power cube they call the tesseract. And I thought that, I didn't quite understand initially. I mean, I'd seen the Avengers movies, but I didn't know, I didn't remember that they were calling their thing the tesseract. But I looked into it and I thought, well, that's not kind of, that's not a bad association. People sort of associate power with the word tesseract. And one of the things we want to do is sort of empower people to go to the next level with their business and with their creativity and with innovation and those kinds of things. And then point sort of conveys the idea of a focal point, the one place where people come together to do their creative activities. So it combines the kinds of things that we want to emphasize in both co-working and in makerspaces. And if you think about the combination of the two, it's like an office space that also has engineering laboratories. So if somebody wants to start a business and they need to develop a prototype, if they have office space without engineering capacity, then maybe they can develop a prototype someplace else. But if they have it available, then if it's a technology-based company, then having engineering capability on site gives you the ability to develop your prototype. Maybe even do light manufacturing, like one-off and two-off type projects and custom projects. So the basic idea is for the space is to have office space and then workshop space. And to have it, to focus on the aesthetics of the space so that it's comfortable to the people who have to work there in whatever capacity. We haven't actually found a space yet. What we do have is a community All right, so we started our organization as Fayetteville Makers through meetup.com, and we call ourselves creators because that's the one common descriptor of what we're doing, basically. Is this a touchscreen? Mm-hmm. Okay. Makes a lot of things easier, so you should have told me that before.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so we've got about 290 people in our group, and we've been having some meetups related to co-working and some related to activities. We just had a series of classes that was well attended last week, and then 2 weeks before that. We are legally incorporated as a nonprofit, and of course we started generating revenue even as a result of the classes. Not a lot, but some. And let's see. How do I, there we go. All right, there's the introduction to Arduino class. We actually had 5 people attending the class because we advertise it both in the meetup group, and also we have a Facebook group called Tesseract Point. This is where we list our events. For example, today's event here, the 1 Million Cups presentation. We've got an event coming up in April. We're going to travel to Burlington to exhibit at Holly Hill Mall. Ben Harris is the head of a makerspace that's in Burlington. He calls it Steam Junction. He's organizing a maker fair. We're going to travel to Burlington and participate in that event. Steam Junction, you may be familiar with the idea of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and STEAM includes A as in art. And that's a common theme that you'll find in makerspaces around the country and even around the world. One thing that we're not necessarily doing at Tesseract Point is having programs for kids. We're really an adult-oriented, that's maybe the wrong phrase, but our focus is on adults as entrepreneurs, trying to start businesses, doing projects that might be dangerous for kids and that sort of thing. But we're not exclusive to kids, and we do want to have a sort of STEM program. But it's more likely that we'll partner with other groups that focus on kids and education and sort of help them do their thing, rather than necessarily doing that through our location. One of the key, or I guess the most important project that we have underway right now is the project to locate a space. And that's been something that's sort of been dogging us since we got started. Because the idea of a makerspace is to have a space. We're an active community, but we need a space. And we looked at a number of places over several years, really, and it seems like every time we pick out a place that we think we're going to be happy with, someone else comes in and makes a purchase, and they get it before we do. Because it's been, we've had some struggle to bring the group together into a sort of a coherent group that actually makes things happen as a group, physically in reality. And maybe that's starting to turn around. Hopefully, though, we'll be able to find a location soon and make something happen. We've got a strategy right now. The focus of finding a space right now is on find it. That's one of the buildings that somebody else purchased. Here's what we're looking at now. There's the Lafayette Restaurant on Cliffdale Road. And it's a building that's been vacant for probably 15 years or something. And the current owner is ready to tear it down. He wants to demolish it. Apparently, he's run into some problems with Diener and the regulations about tearing down a building without having a plan when the building's located on a dam. So he's interrupted his demolition progress. These are some photos that I took when they had started some demolition. I think maybe it's actually beneficial because they got about as far as removing the asbestos, so that's a good thing. The thing is, the building is in really poor condition, which I guess is kind of a good thing in the sense that the price, that we might get it for, it's not necessarily going to be very high. But I don't look at the building and the condition of the building so much as the location of where the building is. I mean, it's a perfect location for the kinds of things that we're doing because of the aesthetics, being located on the lake, having sort of a forest of the sort off to the side where the lake exists because there's a creek there, and the creek is dammed, puts a lake on one side, the creek still exists on the other side, and the creek is on our property if we get the property. So it's kind of like a garden kind of area off to the side, which is ideal for a great office building. I don't have drawings for what I want to do, but if you're familiar with the building, if you've seen it from the street, let's see if I have another picture. Yes, that. Where's it going to? Touch screen's a little bit difficult. But anyway, if you look at the building, I mean, because it's on a dam, there's a slope. right? So there's a lower part of the building and there's an upper part of the building, kind of on a diagonal. But on the diagonal, it makes sort of a U shape. So if you start on one end, you go around and you go downstairs where the stairs are, and then you come back the other way. It's sort of a U, but it's on a slant. And the idea that we have is to put the office space in the upper part of the building, so it's got a view of the lake, and then the maker space in the lower part of the building on the opposite end of the U, so it's acoustically isolated. So if there's some part of the workshop, the activities in the workshop that's generating noise, that noise will be far enough away from the office space that it's not going to, produce some interference. But because the building was a restaurant before, the downstairs area was where the kitchen and storage areas were. So it's basically a warehouse kind of layout already. And then upstairs is where the main dining rooms were. So the idea is to convert the dining rooms to office space. It's got a sloping roof like a typical house has. The roof is mostly rotten, so we want to get rid of that anyway. Replace it with a flat roof at pretty much the same height, which gives us room for 2 floors. So we have like an open office, an open seating type offices downstairs, and then the upstairs we would have some dedicated spaces. And because we're a nonprofit that's based on membership, we sell memberships at different levels. We would have people who are members at the co-working level, and then other members that are at the makerspace level. We're also talking about possibly offering lifetime memberships as a way of raising funds initially. And then, of course, leasing the dedicated office space upstairs. The thing is, if we can get this at all, it's going to run probably somewhere, I think we can do the whole project for between $300,000 and $350,000. So we would need to raise at least the down payment on a couple of levels of loans and then do some kind of structure. I'm still trying to figure out what the right structure is for how to make all that happen and how to do it in sufficient time that we actually get the property before the building's demolished. Because I think demolishing the building would prevent us from being able to use the property at all. I'm not sure we can build another building on the same place. So we have to pretty much save the basic structure of this building, which is basically cinder block walls. So the cinder block walls would stay in place, the foundation would stay in place, the roof would go, the glass windows would go. A lot of the basic things that get moldy would go. So, but that's the idea, and then so that's phase 2. Phase 1 would be to find a temporary place so we can actually have rooms where we're operating in while this is happening, because this is going to take 6 months or more. Might even take 6 months just to do the planning. But we don't want to wait that long before we're operating, so we need to find another location of at least 3,000 or 4,000 feet for only like $500 a month, which is probably wishful thinking. And then we can actually get started. I also have plans, because we're going to go to the Maker Faire. I'm hoping to, I'm talking with a group that has a step van, and I want to see if they'll donate a step van to us that we can use as a vehicle to sort of travel to different locations. And that's the status. If anybody has any other questions about what a makerspace is or how we're combining a makerspace with a co-working space, I can let you know that. And I was also going to give some examples of other makerspaces around the state and the country, but I think probably by now everybody here has an idea of some of those at least. So, I guess that's it.
Have you considered getting sponsorships in order to raise money, like some of the larger either universities or any tech industries that would be interested in being on the ground floor for that?
That's one of the things we've talked about, is having like maybe corporate memberships so the universities can join and have students use the space. How to structure that isn't very clear in terms of like whether it should be limited to how many students are in the building at a given time. How do you rotate the names on the roster at different times, or do you just let people come in anytime they want to?
I was actually not talking about membership, but sponsorship, true sponsorships.
Yeah, I sort of diverted myself. I was going to say 2 things. That was the first thing. The second thing was sponsorship. Sponsorship, tool companies, for example, like Northern Tools or Lowe's and Home Depot and that sort of thing might be appropriate, and then the companies that make 3D printers and laser cutters and those kinds of things could possibly provide sponsorship. And then there are companies that get involved in STEM and STEAM efforts that might be interested in sponsoring us, that really directly, their market really has nothing to do with that necessarily, but they're interested in contributing to the community. So that's a thing to consider as well.
Have you done any exploration on that? Or I have a resource, not to get sponsorship, but she works with individuals to show them how they can write letters and how they can build. And in fact, I've got a meeting with her later this month for my event about how you can actually ask these companies and position it so it's a benefit towards them,
Right.
and what you're going to do, and make sure that it's all written so that they go, oh yeah, sure, here's a check for $5,000.
Yeah. That would be great. If you want to talk about those contacts, I'd like to
Absolutely.
learn. So, yes?
I kind of would hesitate over the lifetime membership, because most co-making space, you're there for the startup until you get launched, and then you hope they're going to move out into the community and grow and get bigger. Since you are nonprofit, I would really look at grants, especially since you're talking about STEM. There are a lot of grants out there so that you wouldn't have to borrow the money, you wouldn't have to depend on selling the long-term spaces. And that way you can keep your population moving, and hopefully we launch more businesses in this area.
That's what I hope to do. One of the things that you get from having a makerspace in your community is on one level, there's a sort of random people working on projects because the space is available and you can do neat, exciting things there. But you also get the stimulus to innovation. If people have the capability to make tangible products, then that's what they're going to do. And if they make a product that people want to buy and they build a business around it, that becomes a manufacturing business, and the probability is fairly high that that manufacturer is going to locate locally. So it's not just, for fun kind of location. We want to emphasize the incubator aspects to it, so that someone who's trying to build a business that it can become a manufacturing business can locate their office space here at a very low price. They've got access to the engineering facilities, which is the makerspace, and engineering. One of the things we want to organize as a not-for-profit is that there are organizations that manufacture or that sell software that's fairly high-priced, and it's directed towards the engineering market. And we can get the nonprofit pricing on that software and have it available. And even if we just have 1 or 2 seats, then when we make that workstation available to our members, they can use that software to do the things they need to do to design their products and that kind of thing. So, but the spin-off is that the companies that locate here, if they're successful, they move to other places like Military Business Park or out on 301 or some other new location.
But it sounds like for that kind of software, a corporate sponsorship would be ideal, because not only can it help pay your expenses, but you can get things like their products at a significantly reduced price, if not free.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them out there that are willing to sponsor, especially if it promotes their products.
For what?
Especially if it promotes their products.
Of course, yeah. And that's...
And do you consider selling the name of the building? A lot of people overlook that. There are a lot of people who will pay for their name. I mean, when Tamara and I were in Kansas City, we went to Sprint Accelerator. I mean, they will pay a good amount of money to put their name on.
That's not something I've thought about specifically. I've grown accustomed to Tesseract Point as the name for the building, so...
Oh, it can be part of the name, but you can also have a corporate part of it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't object to having corporate signage and that sort of thing, in the building and, in the different classrooms, or maybe we could sell the name of the classroom.
Exactly. Now we're thinking, because there's actually a community college that has a large culinary program that has sold the names of the kitchen space or this classroom or whatever, and absolutely they pay for it.
Okay. So that's something to consider and to investigate. So. Any other questions?
What are your membership costs?
That hasn't been finalized. We're still working on the bylaws. That would probably be something either in the bylaws or an attachment to the bylaws. But the numbers we're looking at are a basic membership of $35, and let's see, I got that published on the Facebook group. $35 for the basic membership, $55 for the regular maker membership, $195 a month for the business membership, which would be in the co-working space. I think this is it. I guess I posted that on a separate post. This is basically a description of the four kinds of activities. It's the co-working space, which everybody, I guess, is familiar with, and the engineering and workspace, classroom space, and then entertainment space. I also want to have sort of auditorium that I've got some unusual ideas, I guess, about what we want to do. Part of the idea is to have just sort of like a big rectangular space that's mostly empty all the time. And then whenever there's an event, we bring in seating and staging and lighting, whatever's necessary for that kind of an event. But what that does is it makes it infinitely reconfigurable, and we're going to call it the holodeck. So in addition to being able to have a kind of presentation where there are people seated in front of a stage and there's some event going on the stage, we can do things like actually bring in walls and do virtual reality type things, and like, personal experience of somebody being inside. I mean, there's this thing called a cube, where you basically have 4 walls and there are projectors projecting on the walls. So you stand inside the cube and it looks like you're in some different location because it's projected all around you. And then VR and AR is very popular right now, like with the Meta headsets and those kinds of things, where you just basically sit in a seat and you wear the headset and you experience being in a different place. But that's a little bit more limited than, for example, the space you're in, you share with nobody when you're wearing a headset. When you're inside of a VR cube, then you can have other people inside the VR cube and you can appear to be in this other location. And it's useful not only for just sort of experimenting with the technology, but it's useful for, say, presentations. Like if you wanted to do an architectural presentation, then you might have the building site represented in like full-scale 3D, and you can physically appear to be visiting that location, even before it's constructed. But as far as the rates, that would be, it's not updating the page for some reason. Oh, I know why. Because this is the hyperlink. So anyway, I guess I can go over those. I've posted quite a bit since then. That's one of the VR headsets that I was talking about. All right, so I'll just go over it like the way I did a moment ago. $35 for a basic membership, but basically that would give you access to the lounge, to the makerspace workshops, but during limited hours. So mostly during, I don't know what the actual hours would be, but there'd be like an earliest time and the latest time that you could come. Or it might be limited on how many days a week you're allowed to come in. $55 would be enough that you're able to use the lounge and the workshops at any time around the clock. Then the $195 would be the same, but the access is to both the maker spaces, the lounge, and the co-working spaces. And if we
These
did
monthly?
do it, what?
These monthly rates?
This would be a monthly rate. So if you think about it, if you wanted, like if you were a small business and you wanted an office on this scale, you would be paying probably a couple $1,000s minimum. And you've got access to pretty much the whole facility, but you're paying just for your one membership. Or if you're a business that has multiple employees, then You would pay, twice, say if you have 2 employees, and then there'd be another rate that if you have more than that, there'd be a certain reduced rate. And we're still trying to decide what the right numbers are for that.
How would you become a lifetime member?
What we're talking about now is something that's equivalent to approximately 2.5 years of the $55 rate in advance, or around $1,500, and that would give you lifetime membership to the whole facility, basically, so it would include the co-working space. And that would be, you wouldn't have to pay any additional dues. You might be on a special mailing list for additional contributions, and you'd be kind of considered the core membership, but there wouldn't be any requirements for additional dues, is the way we're talking about it. So.
Over here.
Yes.
If I'm going to start a business, I'm going to use your makerspace here. Do I have an address I can use for my business?
We would set it up so you could have your own address. So you could use this location as an address. I think we need to go through the post office to find out how to designate like particular suite numbers and that sort of thing, to actually get the mail delivered.
So
on that
it's
basis.
like virtual, then we can have the same space having many suite numbers.
What do you mean, the same space?
Well, if I'm going to use a makerspace, and I'm in here, is that going to be reserved just for me, or for people that come in when I'm not there?
If you're a member, then, if you're a business member, I think having a mailing address would be associated with being one of the business members. This is your office. You would be expected to sort of treat this as your office space.
Right.
You work there, you meet clients there, their meeting rooms, that sort of thing.
So then, are you
And
going to
would
be
receive.
limited to the number of people you're going to take in then?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to be limited in the number of people you're going to take in as business space,
The business membership is per person,
right?
okay? And then reduced rates if you have multiple persons. In terms of bringing in clients and guests and
No,
having
I'm
meetings,
talking
there
about
wouldn't be
the
any
number
additional
of
charges.
Give the space, and I got the impression the space here be used by me, then somebody else comes in and uses it again, or is it just going to be dedicated to me?
Oh, it's shared space, it's open seating, it's like maybe
That's
going
what
into
I thought.
Starbucks where you have large
So if it's open
tables.
space, then
Yeah.
I can have a suite 377, I can have T, I can have a suite 377Q, and I'm using the same space, but my address is different, but it's the same space, yes?
Right, okay, the address would actually be mapped to you as a member, not so much to some physical space, unless you were in the dedicated office spaces.
Okay.
And I guess one good example might be, where's the mouse? This is one example of a makerspace that I visited some time ago and kind of liked. So their emphasis is on wood in terms of decor, which I don't oppose, but it's not necessarily what we're going to settle on. But you see how their seating is. They've got long tables, they've got dividers, they've got places. Well, I didn't do that.
You touched it.
Yeah.
Community.
So you've got a place where you can plug in, you've got your basic private space. Maybe yesterday you sat over here, today you're going to be sitting here. Maybe you didn't come in last week at all. It's however you want to run your business, that's what you do. But as long as you're a member, then the place is open to you anytime. And then they've got these back meeting rooms that are offset with glass. So at least in these cases, you can actually, there's a visual communication between the two rooms. And they also have dedicated office space. I'm not sure which location this is. I don't think that's the one that I visited. Or maybe it is College Parkway. I think that's the one way. Anyway, So that's kind of the idea. So if we get the De Lafayette restaurant, then what used to be a dining room would become something like this, where there would be a long table, then there would be some short tables and some sit-by-yourself tables and some actual desks and couches and sort of a lounge kind of seating area. There would be storage for your stuff, so that if you bring in things that you want to leave all the time, that goes in storage. And then there's the conference rooms. There's a particular part of the dining area that I would want to be a conference room. One of the things that I'm kind of inspired by is, let's Google again.
Did you just teach us how to skip over the ads there?
No, I just taught how do you find the profile image associated with a video on YouTube? So I kind of like the layout here, where like if this was the restaurant and these windows were overlooking the lake, you'd have kind of a sort of a cafe area off to the side. The rest of the dining room would be more traditional office space. But I like the way this has like 2 stories up here. So if you imagine, instead of exactly this layout, a conference room over there, then a staircase that goes up this way, and then when you get up to the landing, you could walk around this way to a second conference room upstairs, and then off to the left is where we would have the dedicated offices. So it's basically the long part here. And I'm also interested in like off to this side, which would be, if you're familiar with the layout of the restaurant, there's a parking lot that comes off to the east side of the building. I want to replace the end of that building with basically a circular room that would essentially have 2 walls. There's an outer wall and an inner wall. Space between them would be a gallery that you could enter and walk through to get to the rest of the building. But the inner part would be basically just round seating with a dome over it, and people would sit on the floor basically because the floor would be laid out in steps. And the dome could potentially be used as a planetarium. And there are all kinds of activities that could go on in there, so that would be the dome gallery. The lounge that exists, the old marquee lounge, would be the holodeck basically. Only we'd want to move one of the walls so it's a little bit larger. So we'd have 2 basic performance spaces. There's the dome gallery and then the holodeck. And notice there's no bricks in this design, so we're not necessarily going with bricks, but some kind of modern, comfortable decor. Any other questions?
Have you considered crowdfunding Kickstarter as another fundraising
Yes.
option with a virtual tour of the concept of what this makerspace will look like? Using that as a tool?
That would be great. There's something called OpenSim, and I've started a project which would have been nice if it was ready today, to do a 3D model of the building, or the concept of the building, in a virtual world. That would probably help with crowdfunding too. Yeah.
People like that.
We could even do basically a walkthrough video. It's called Machinima when you do it in OpenSim, and that would be great too.
Something tangible. People are visual and they like to see that. Our church had did that where our pastor did a virtual tour of what the new church will look like on the inside.
Uh-huh.
And because of that, the church members are like, okay, how much do you want us to pay? They pledge more versus saying this is what we want to do. But the moment they did a 3D or virtual tour, what it's going to look like, then people got more excited. The church members saying, okay, I'm all in.
Right.
Here's my money.
So I think you're right. People are visual and they have to see
Right.
things, because, I mean, for one thing, even when you try to express something in words, you're visualizing it yourself internally, and you're hopefully creating some kind of vision in your audience's mind, but you don't have a lot of control over exactly what kind of vision they're generating. So something that you generate this visual like this, it's a shared experience, so you're visualizing the same thing. So you're right.
Well, what can this community do for you?
Get the word out. Word of mouth is always important. If you're interested in becoming a member of the organization, join the Facebook group and the Fayetteville Makers is more for the maker group, not necessarily the co-working group, but it may help to join that. Tesseract Point combines probably everything else. Keep an eye on our website here, because even though it's a little bit behind the times, it's still talking about the metal building on Rim Road that we didn't get. You can receive updates, I guess, there. Let me know if you're interested in maybe helping labor, co-labor with the rest of us to make this happen, rather than, we've got a lot of people, like the 290 people I showed you there, a lot of those people are basically just sort of waiting for something to happen. They're not active participants. And what we really need right now are active participants, people who want to actually put your hands and your feet in and get things done. If you got good advice or connections, that would be great. If you know where we can get cheap space that serves our needs, like very soon, that would be great too. And if you've got tips on how to be creative about getting property like this that's really attractive, but maybe a little expensive, I mean, there are a lot of creative ways you can keep the costs down and do some incredible things. So if you've got some experience or you know somebody who does in making things like that happen, help let us know with that too.
Thank you.